Here with lead writer Aric DiLalla in the Broncos studio, I am your Broncos team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. On Wednesday, head coach Sean Payton, GM George Paton, and owner and CEO Greg Penner addressed the media following the conclusion of the team's 2024 NFL season. They touched on a lot of topics, but one of the main things that they all seem to be proud of was the fact that they were able to raise the standard of what this team can do and become a playoff caliber franchise.
Yeah, that's right. I think that was one of the main takeaways from Wednesday's press conferences. Every year you get these end-of-season press conferences. It's kind of a state of the team. Where do things stand? Where are things moving forward? And that's what we heard from, like you said, Sean Payton, George Paton, Greg Penner on this Wednesday. And in terms of the standard of what's next, I think the main takeaway was they did a lot to be proud of, right?
Yeah.
And Sean Payton said in a vacuum, proud of this team, what they were able to accomplish, but also not satisfied in any means. And I think a lot of the conversation centered around closing the gap between them and some of these playoff teams like the Baltimore Ravens, the Buffalo Bills, who we just saw them obviously play in the playoffs, and the Kansas City Chiefs. And no matter who it was, they kind of focused on that's got to be our number one goal this offseason. George Paton said we've got to find that secret sauce to compete with those teams, to close the gap. Sean Payton said, listen, I felt like we competed with them in the first half, talking about Buffalo in the wild card round, and saying that there's a very thin line between, he often says there's a thin line between a groove and a rut, and I think he talked about the same thing, that a couple of players, winning at the line of scrimmage, the kicking game, a couple things here and there, and you can close that gap between you and those top teams. And that's the expectation moving forward. Greg Penner said, going into 2025, our goal, our number one goal, is to win the division and unseat Kansas City, who has obviously won the division dating all the way back to 2016. And so we're all excited about what happened this year, what the Broncos were able to accomplish. But all that said, they're already looking ahead for more, and every move this offseason has to be made with the idea of we've got to find a way to get closer to those teams like the Bills, like the Ravens, like the Chiefs.
If you look at the way that this season played out, it's a lot of games that were decided by one possession or two. And you look at the body of work that the offense was able to put together, especially with a rookie quarterback. Bo Nix deserves a lot of praise, obviously nominated for Rookie of the Year, which is really exciting for him. But the way that he was able to really come in and be part of that leadership on this team, despite being a young guy, what did you kind of see from him? And obviously what all of ownership and the front office took away.
Yeah, I think that this was, we've seen great things from Bo Nix this year, but you wait till the end of the year for kind of these proclamations, if you will, or the overall assessment. And what we heard from all three of these folks, Greg Penner, Sean Payton, George Paton, was we found our franchise guy. And that's exciting to hear.
Yeah.
Sean Payton said, listen, you've got to find that guy that can take you back to the success that you want to have. They think they found that guy in Bo Nix. George Paton talked about everybody's looking for that rookie quarterback that can take them to where they want to be. They think they found that in Bo Nix. And then Greg Penner talking about, hey, whether it's on the field, off the field, everything that Bo Nix was able to do, stepping in from day one like a veteran instead of a rookie, and able to handle the season, whether it was from a toughness perspective, obviously playing through some stuff around that Raiders and Browns game late in the season, whether it's leading his teammates, whether it's taking this team on late drives to either tie or win a football game, and then the on-the-field aspects of the accuracy, the mobility, the athleticism, the arm strength, all of those things that we saw again and again show Greg Penner, they show Sean Payton, George Paton, that Bo Nix is capable of being that franchise guy. And now the next step is to raise that level of play. And one of the things they mentioned too was that, listen, Bo wants to be great, and his standards, his expectations have to be higher than everybody else's for himself and for this team, and they think they are. They mentioned he's still around the building. They're saying, Bo, take a break here, but he's been in the last few days, ready to get better. He had a 30-minute meeting with Sean Payton, already looking ahead to the offseason. He'll have a plan put in place so that he can maximize this time going into year two. And quarterbacks often make a jump going from their rookie year to year two. So really exciting to think about that with Bo Nix, if he can be even better. But, man, what a terrific rookie year. And like they all said, they think they've found their guy.
And the way that he's been able to just be in the locker room and command the respect of everyone, like I said, a lot of his teammates spoke really highly of him, and the way that he's been able to really just come in and not be seen as a rookie. He was a captain on this team, and when you look at the way that this team has kind of built up and the makeup of it, they talk about the toughness, the resiliency of this team, the accountability of this team. When you look at free agency and the approach there, they obviously want to get guys that are going to come in and match what they've built here all last season and what they continue to build in the future.
Yeah, a great point. That was one of the main takeaways from today as well, right? Was how do you keep building now? We talked about closing the gap to the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens. Well, how do you do that? Some of it is continuing to draft well. Obviously, we saw guys like Jonathan Cooper, Pat Surtain, Quinn Miners get extensions this year, right? Garrett Bowles. And part of that is, hey, you had these draft picks that you were able to re-sign and keep in Denver, and that's a big part of finding success. But also you brought in free agents. George Paton said, hey, Malcolm Roach might have been our most impressive free agent signing, the way he was able to help us stop the run. And they added a bunch of guys over the last few years, whether it's Zach Allen, Mike McGlinchey, right? You can go on and on and on. Ben Powers, about the guys that they've added. Brandon Jones this year, right? And the key is now, how do you keep adding guys that are both high character guys that want to win, that are passionate about the game of football, but are also going to elevate this team? And asked about their strategy, George Paton said, listen, a couple of years ago, we made the splash. We had those big ticket free agent signings. Last year, we were a little bit more measured. And while he did say, and Greg Penner said the same thing, that, hey, we're not opposed to going out there and making a splash this year. They do have more cap space than they did a year ago. But they also said, listen, it worked for us to be measured, and we found guys that fit well. We've continued to develop this football team. You don't want to stray away from that too much. And so we'll see how free agency goes. And I wouldn't rule out that they, like they said, that they do make a big name signing or they make a splash. But it sounds like overall, this strategy of you have a young quarterback, now let's just consistently keep building this roster as we move toward more success.
I think that's one of the good things when you find your quarterback. Now it's like, okay, we have that. Now it's time to build around him and give him more pieces on this team to become even more successful than what they reached this season, which, as you mentioned, they're all proud of. But now it just pushes the goalposts farther. Be like, okay, now we want to get there, and they want to continue to push those things. And I think when you look at just the overall aspect of the NFL and how it's growing, international games are a really big deal. Obviously, a lot of new stadiums coming up for different franchises. They touched on those things as well.
Yeah, I think those were kind of my final two takeaways from the end of season press conferences. Greg Penner talked about both of these things. And starting with the international games, the Broncos are not going to host an international game. And what that means is every 8 years, as Greg Penner was saying, a team has a designated home game that is applied to an international market, essentially. The Broncos do not have one of those this year, but they are playing road games against two teams that have already had international games announced. The New York Jets playing in London, I believe, and the Indianapolis Colts playing in Berlin, which will be the first NFL game in Berlin. Greg Penner said that it's absolutely possible that they could play one of those games overseas this year. Obviously, Sean Payton likes the team-building element of a trip. We saw it at the Greenbrier.
Yeah.
And the Broncos, as Greg Penner said, would certainly welcome that opportunity to go abroad. They did it back in 2022 in London, won the football game over there, and it was a great week kind of seeing all the activations. So certainly open to that. And then you mentioned the stadium, the training facility as well, Broncos Park powered by Common Spirit. He gave updates on both of those. With Broncos Park powered by Common Spirit, they're about 10 to 15% done with the construction, about 90% done with the design. They are on track. They expect it to only interrupt one training camp, essentially, to have to plan around that. And fans, you might say, okay, well why does that matter, right? And one, you attract free agents, but then also the players that you do have here, you're able to make sure that they are prepared as possible each week to win football games. So that's really important. In terms of the stadium, there's been some reports out there. Greg Penner did acknowledge that the Broncos are looking at a lot of different options, whether it's Lone Tree, the current existing site of the stadium, other options in Denver, but no decisions have been made. They're still evaluating all options, a lot of work to do. And really, whether that's renovating a new stadium, again, all options still on the table, and that's something that no decisions have been made. But obviously, Broncos country, I'm sure, will be interested in that at some point. But as it has been the last couple of updates, continuing to do their due diligence, which that's what you want, right? You want them to come to a well-informed decision.
One of the biggest things they could really hang their hat on is that they want this to be a destination where players want to come play here, and people and athletes want to come to this franchise, not only for its winning tradition, but what they're building, and just knowing that you're going to get the best of the best here. And I think that's going to play really well as they go into the 2025 NFL season. Well, it's crazy to think that the regular season is now over for the Broncos and they head into the offseason. A lot of things to get done on that checklist. But once again, I'm your team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. This is our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla. And for the latest headlines, make sure you guys visit DenverBroncos.com.